we're going to get into conversation about the piece that we just saw. Naveed is an immigration attorney who does this work every day. Mariana works with the LGBT Center, focusing on trans people in the community and their immigration needs as well. And Masane is a social worker that is also the executive director of cross-cultural expression. Did I get that correctly? All right. So, AB, first of all, I think the first question that we have to address is, where did this come from? How did this start for you, and why did you want to do this piece?
So this had sort of an interesting inception. There was a global exchange program at USC where 8 Chinese filmmakers came, and they were supposed to pair up with eight students from Los Angeles and make a documentary in 2 months. And the topic that I pitched was about the gay Chinese immigrant community in Los Angeles. And while the Chinese students seemed to find it interesting, the Chinese faculty who was with them went ahead to say things like there are no gay people in China and that we couldn't do this project. So instead we did a project about a famous Instagram dog, which was a topic that was permissible.
That's a way to get into a story.
That's, yeah.
A famous Instagram dog.
A famous Instagram dog. But to the credit of my partner and my colleague from Beijing, we went ahead and did a series of interviews, and one of those interviews was Brandon. And what ended up sticking out, we just came with a DSLR, plucked it down, and asked Brandon some questions. Yeah, you still remember that day. And the final question was, what does home mean to you? And Brandon's answer, that's that piece you see at the end when there's the orange wall behind him, and he says that he's given up so much in China. But if he could ever make a warm home here with his partner, everything he sacrificed and left behind was worth it. And what we ended up doing is screening the famous Instagram dog piece, and then that segment of the interview in front of the Chinese faculty and students. And what happened is that the Chinese faculty and students were moved by it and came up to us afterwards and said, thank you for showing that piece. And so we thought that there must be something deeper here about this theme of home, and that if it managed to touch them, this could be true for other communities, and on the intersection of immigrants and members of the LGBT community, this was the theme we wanted to follow. And that's how the whole project got started.
I watched them all separately over the last couple of weeks, and the question of what home means, I think, is really, really important, especially when you're an immigrant. And I'm curious, how did you answer that question for yourself? Because you obviously come into this with a thesis or some kind of message that you want to convey. What did the word home end up meaning to you, if it meant something differently after the film was over?
That's a great question.
Well, thank you.
I think it's two things. The first thing is that I guess the journey for finding home, I can only speak for myself. I don't know about everyone else on this panel or in the audience, but it's a continuous journey. And I myself, I'm from Israel. I landed 2 days ago. I'm a little jet lagged, but I'm more than geography.
You were coming back from working in Israel, like you didn't just get here.
Right, this is true too. But regardless, it's constantly something that I question. The second answer is that I feel, and this is true, and I guess you'll speak to that later on, that it's kind of a variation on a theme, and that each person goes through that answer and repeats, the answer changes, and it changes from person to person. And whether it's kind of a place that you long to return to, or a place that you want to go 180 degrees and never think about again, it still remains that home, that place that's in your mind, and you cannot fully detach yourself from, no matter how far you've left from Iran, China, or El Salvador. And I guess in that sense, that helps me think also of what home means here in the United States, and that it's actually, let me put it this way, the answer to home, to me now means something far more complicated than when we set out and had an idea of what it could mean, and now I am not totally sure.
Well, and it probably has a different meaning for every single person you ask the question of, which I think is a great transition to Eli. I was really moved by specific things that each of you said in the different pieces. a couple of things. So Elahe, at first, I want to ask you. There's a moment where you say that you feel bad for the old version of yourself, and you've disassociated yourself from your days pre-Shabnam and post-Shabnam, and
I still do.
yeah. And shout out to Shabnam who's in the room. Stand up and wave. I'm curious about the disassociation and being able to separate yourself from one part of your life, and you say at the end that it's important for you to be able to forget. I'm sure you've kind of closed off part of that from yourself, but I'm sure it comes back to you at certain times. I'm wondering how you deal with the two different sides of yourself.
Years of therapy.
That's a good answer. It's a good answer.
No, but I think you learn as a kid, and as you grow up, you learn to protect yourself by shutting some part of your brain, maybe, or your feeling. I don't know. I try not to think about it, and even when I agreed to do this, I never thought it would be so hard for me. Like, Mark is here. Is Mark here? I hate him.
Producer in the back.
Mark and Abe, every time, like every single time, except the time that I was in the gym that he was filming far away, I think I cried for days. Even now I cried. It's just, I've seen this more than 10 times, I think. But again, and I cry not because it's me. I cry because I see someone else, and again, I don't know how I'm doing it, but I'm just doing it because it's too hard for me to. I've dealt with part of it, but it's just too hard for me to think about it daily. It comes to me, but I shut it down. And again, Abe, thank you. He really told my story better than I could do. So yeah, that's.
In the piece, you talk about your mother and her saying to you, "I want you to go live your life, but don't talk about it. Don't bring it up." And it seemed, and you can please correct me if I'm wrong. It seemed as if that was her way of saying, "Go be yourself," and trying to show you a bit of love in the way that she could at that time. And then you say, like, years later, she came and hugged Shabnam immediately and came to your home. How did that change how you felt about yourself and your reality, like with your mom kind of having that evolution and coming to you?
Well, I think after meeting Shabnam, I understood a lot of things about Persians because until then my only like having direct contact with was my family. But after meeting her, getting to know her, and hearing her story and the people that she worked with and our other friends, I came to this because for me, I was never in the closet, but I was never out. I lived a double life since I remember. But when I came out, to me, it was like I was at that point of my life that either I had to kill myself or I have to choose to live the life that I want. I couldn't do the double life anymore. And that's why I came out to my family, to my mom, dad, and my brothers. And they were like, my brothers were like, yeah, so what, we knew. But like, and my mom, she reacted really bad, not because she was homophobic or anything, or maybe she was at that time, but she had friends who were gay, she had clients who were like lesbians, and very cool with it, but she couldn't get the concept. And I think Shabnam taught me that I had to give them time, because it took time for me to be able to think, okay, this is who I am, and accept myself. So I tried to give her time and actually educate her, even far away. I didn't talk to her much or anything, but I think I understood that I have to give her time. But the time that she told me after a year not talking to each other, that go live your life, and yeah, I think it was kind of out of love, but at the same time, she was afraid what other people will say about her,
Yeah.
or about me. So I think time was the most.
The last thing in your piece that resonated with me in each of the pieces, and Abby, I want you to speak to this as well, was the election. That showed up in each of the pieces in different ways. You light up in two different spaces, talking about Shabnam and standing there voting. And that voting moment seemed to have a real impact on you. Like you were beaming as you were on your way to go vote, as you stood in the polling place. Why was that so important to you?
I waited all my life for that moment. I never voted in my life, never, ever. And to me, that person that I was voting for and what I was doing, it was that I followed her all her career, and I talked about it even way before she even ran first time or second time. So to me, it meant a lot because I really believed in her, and I still do. I believe in her, and she was kind of role model to me, you know. And I think we talked about it, and I was like so sure, and I was like so happy, and I still, when I think about it, I'm happy.
Yeah.
But
You lit up as I asked you the question.
it meant a lot to me. It was really personal to me. It was really personal to me because I followed it, and I think I was so sure this is the moment. This is the moment that we are ready for a woman, and not just because, yeah, maybe 90% was it because she was a woman, but it was not just because of that. But yeah, that meant a lot to me.
Amy, we've heard from filmmakers and television show writers, like the election changed their work in some kind of way. And this election is a turning point in each of these stories. Talk to me about the election and how it impacted the stories of each of these people, and telling those stories.
In telling the stories, or of each of the subjects?
In telling the stories, like how did the election throw a curveball for you as a filmmaker? And
Well, we went that morning with Ella to vote, and you were saying before about crying often. Well, you also cried that morning, but tears of joy, because Ella thought that a woman was going to become the president of the United States, and what that meant to you coming from Iran and being a woman. And then we went to film Stacy, we actually went and filmed Stacy in a sports bar in downtown LA. And we thought we were going to have some sort of moment of reflection and also happiness having a woman voted, or whatever she had to say. And then we left Stacy, and then the results started coming in. So we drove all the way back to Boyle Heights and sat with her for hours until the final results came in, and it was like, oh, well, it's not the way we anticipated. And then with Brandon, we went to protest the next day as well. So it was kind of busy trying to get, and also for Brandon, what it meant to protest coming from China in that way, which is something that's not done over there. So I guess in each of them, we chose a different scene, a different moment that sort of took it in that way.
Brandon, I want to come to you. When I watched this the first time, there was a moment that you say something and it resonated with me, and as I was sat here in the theater, you said it on screen, and I heard an audible "oh" in the room. You said, the longer you stay here, the longer you feel like you're in China. That really hung with me for a moment. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. To President Trump, I'm very strange. Most of Chinese Americans support Trump because most of Chinese understand Trump. For the past 40 years, the Chinese is developing economic. That means make great in China, just as great in America. I think most of Chinese think Trump would be great in America. No, not care about what he can do, how to do it. So just as a China.
You're saying you think most Chinese thought that Trump could be good from an economic perspective, not necessarily think about his politics.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. For immigration, okay. Forbid other immigration, for other people immigrating in America, they think, okay, these people maybe do some welfare, not good to American, just welfare, just not pay the tax.
So you're saying you felt like the Chinese people felt that from an economic perspective, there could be some positive that would come from him, but then he's come into office and obviously the immigration parts of that have been challenging. The other part of what you said that spoke to me was your default was to hide. That really broke my heart as I watched for you to say that your default was to hide. You found a community here. Do you feel like your default is still to hide, or do you feel like you've been able to break that?
Just one story. When I graduated from University of Wisconsin, I decided to continue to stay in America. Most of my classmates or friends said, "Are you crazy? Why are you staying there?" The first thing I give them answer is that, "Oh, I got the UCLA offer," but the most important thing is that I could stay here freely. I don't care about the other people. I could do myself. Also, a lot of people respect me. Not care about I'm gay. Not care about I'm Chinese. Not care about other things. Just respect you based on your action. That's the reason why I want to stay in here.
I can understand that. AB, talk to me about Brandon's story. I thought what was really beautiful was the hyper specificity of the group that he found, right? He found this group of Chinese immigrant Angelenos who are coming together to have community, and I thought that was so beautiful. Talk to me about being in that space and filming that, and what was that community like?
I see some community members here smiling in the audience. Well, I think just to quickly piggyback off of something that Brandon said, I think we initially think as Americans that everyone wants to come here, and this is the best place in the world and all that. And speaking to Brandon very quickly, I realized that that was not always the case, and that there was a kind of self-exile to come here, even though it could have been better in China. And I think that was something that was true with all the folks in the Chinese Rainbow Association to one degree or another, that they left, people were engineers, people had professions and were making a lot more money in China, and here they are giving up that life in order, to have some sort of assumed freedom, but with the complexity of language and of being a minority and being immigrants, it's a weird kind of freedom. So in one way, one thing that I understood there is that they had found each other. And we spent a lot of time, Thanksgiving also, you see us with Stacy. We went afterwards and had Thanksgiving with the Chinese Rainbow Association after that. And if you look at my Facebook, there's so many birthday parties that we're invited to the Chinese Rainbow Association, and what you really find there is a community that people care for each other in the deepest way and are the only ones who can really understand each other. And that was something beautiful to see and be part of.
Marianne, I want to jump to you. Stacy is obviously not with us today. She couldn't be here. And obviously you can't speak for all trans women, but you are a trans woman who is taking her citizenship test tomorrow. So that's very exciting.
Monday, actually.
Monday.
Yeah.
But you've been here for a long time in the States. When you saw Stacy's story, what stuck out to you? What spoke to you about her story, and what connected with you?
I think there's so many Stacys in Los Angeles. I think people need to definitely, I appreciate seeing her story shared at Outfest, because I think we've seen Stacys around, and I hope that audience and people are not indifferent to their journeys. I think there's a big community in Los Angeles of transgender women who left their country because of the conditions, and that includes me. And I am an asylee, and I was kind of like, when I accept to be part of this panel, I was thinking like, oh my God, it's gonna be heavy for me, and definitely is. I'm going to my exam and my citizenship exam on Monday, and it's something that I wanted for so long. Never imagined it would be in Trump's time, and I'm afraid. I've been in this country for 20 years, and I filed for my case in front of a judge. And I told him that I appreciate the protection and everything that this country gave me, but also understand the responsibilities. And I've been working, and now I'm in charge of the first led trans organization in Los Angeles. I feel like I have a lot of power in my hands. I have a budget of $1 million, as I mentioned. I wish I can buy shoes with that money.
You've got a good shoe situation today.
But we talk about like our past, and we talk about like everything that people who left their country behind survived. I don't know about you, but I become like so little. I become like I'm someone who doesn't still here.
What do you mean by that?
I feel like that question about like what is home is still a difficult question. And I feel that I have power, and I believe that I can be here representing a lot of people that don't have the chance to be included, don't have the chance to come to Outfest and watch the films and be represented over here. And I do have that chance, and I appreciate that. But it's still hard to look back. And it's hard to look at the future also.
You said you are an asylee. When I was speaking to you earlier, you said you thought it was really important that folks seeking asylum know about the resources that are available to them post-asylum. Can you speak a little bit to the resources that are available to folks here in the Los Angeles area?
Definitely, I believe that a lot of LGBT organizations, it's important to understand that immigration is also an LGBT issue. And organizations that provide services for immigrants should be trained and learn about LGBT issues. I think it's important. And people who put resources, I think it's important to think that especially for transgender women, when they survive all this journey to get to this country, the reality out there is difficult. Trans people don't easily get a job. There's a lot of discrimination. There's a lot of difficult times out there for the people. And I believe that it's important to highlight that after people get released from detention, if they get a good attorney, if they get those resources, outside there are not many things for them. And I think that's what's beautiful about Stacey's story, that she found her way. And I think everyone deserves that opportunity to do what is right, to have a job, to have a place where to live, and someone to love, and to be free, and to start their new life.
You mentioned finding a good lawyer, which is a great segue to Naveed. Naveed, I'm going to come to you in just a second. But as we're still talking about Stacey, Naveed, AB, at the end of the Stacey piece, she wins the Miss Latina pageant, and I have a directing question for you. At the end, you show her back there cleaning the room, and she's kind of looking directly to camera. What was the thought process around the way that you wrapped up that piece?
Well, there's something that is true about dramatic arcs, and I think that's also true about life, which is that I think Stacey's story, it's not a conclusion. The curtain falls, but Stacey continues, and I guess the end of the film, and also knowing Stacey, and the journey sort of begins now. And while she wins the crown and is the queen for a day, she goes back to the hotel room and is still waiting, as she is now, to complete her asylum process. So I think that was kind of the message that we wanted to end on it, that you have those small victories, you have those steps that you move forward, but ultimately it is a very long journey.
I thought that was a really great way to show like this great moment for her, and then yes, she goes back to her life the next day. I thought that was really, really, really smart. Naveed, you are an immigration attorney and you are an advocate on immigration policy. Um, before any specific questions, you see this. What are your top line reactions? Like, what do you watch this and immediately think through your lens?
Yeah, I see it through the lens of an immigration lawyer. I see it through the lens of an immigrant, a gay immigrant. As a immigration lawyer, having talked to applicants, like these very courageous people here, and Stacy as well, I really applaud AB and everyone who was involved, and I know with a lot of people in this film, because you know, there is so much going on in our country and so many battles to fight, but this is one I believe in so much. I said I'm an immigrant myself, you know, where I came from and where I fled from Iran as a child with my parents. Gay people are hanged in public squares. I don't take for granted that I get to be in the United States and come out, and others who are not as fortunate can be executed. So yeah, my top line reaction is, wow, thank you for drawing attention to these really important issues, especially about the election. You know, I'm a guy about laws and policies, and what happened on that election day had consequences, and we are fighting through those consequences every day with volunteer attorneys and courageous immigrants. We're really fighting every day to give them what they deserve and the rights that are really accorded to them from the law, but being slowly snagged away from the government.
I think it's easy for people to see stories like these and feel disempowered or feel like there's nothing that they can do, or they want to know what are the tangible, reachable, accessible things that can be done. Can you speak to that a bit about what can people do after seeing a piece like this?
No hopelessness. There's no room for that. Thank you for asking that. It takes courage. It takes people to speak out. It takes people to stand up for fellow immigrants. Remember, you know, we are, as Stacy spoke about so nicely, she said we have to be united. We have to be united. We are all minorities in so many different ways. We need to be united and stick up for each other. More tangibly, you know, contact your congresspeople, even if they are, you know, seem to advocate on behalf of immigrants. There is more they can do, and we need to hold them accountable for more. And getting even more specific, there are really wonderful organizations around the country. Immigration Equality is a national organization that works tirelessly on behalf of immigrants, and specifically LGBT immigrants. And people can donate their time, they can donate translation services, they can donate their money. So yeah, there was a piece of me that also felt hopeless after the election and thinking about what's going to happen to my clients and all those future immigrants who need our help. And instead, I realized that this is our time to really shine and really be of value to our community members.
Masane, I want to come to you. First of all, we see you in the film, so you're also kind of a celebrity in this room right now.
Thank you.
But Masane, you are a licensed clinical social worker, and you do multicultural counseling, and you're also an Iranian immigrant. I couldn't help but think when I knew that you were going to be on this panel about Ella's story, about how she has dealt with her own experience of being an immigrant, but also being Iranian, of, you know, fleeing her country. Talk to me about the mental health perspective of being an immigrant, of dealing with immigration and all of the nuances of that. I don't think we ever think about that, and kind of the mainstream kind of conversation?
So, for the immigrant experience, as well as I think the LGBTQ experience, what we see a lot of is post-traumatic stress disorder. And what the majority of people do to deal with post-traumatic stress disorder is what Ella had described wonderfully, which is compartmentalize, right? Because that's how you get through it. So you put your gay identity into one corner, and you put your country of origin in one corner, and your feelings towards your family in one, and your feelings towards, and within all of that, you wake up every morning and focus on the one that's most important to you for that day, for making it through the day, and you move forward with that. And you do that as long as you can until one of the other ones catches up with you, and you have a fall, and you have a flashback, and you go through some depression, you go through some anxiety, and if you're lucky, and if you have found a support system, and if you have found some kind of stability, that support system will see you through the next day till you wake up again and you compartmentalize. And I think the challenge here, I think once you get into a place where you feel safe, and this holds true for immigrants as well as for members of the LGBTQ community, once you feel safe for a good period of time, for a stable period of time, then you might feel the courage to start to unify these different parts of yourself. And that's a difficult process, and it's a painful process, and it's a struggle, but I don't think there's a feeling of completeness until that happens, or at least until you find that journey. And so what happens, and I think what we see here in these incredible pieces that I'm a huge fan of A.B. since the day I met him, that we saw is that you're looking at three people specifically on this journey to try to unify, and then you watch the election and you get that hit. You get the hit again and you compartmentalize again. And so this is what you're up against. When your world becomes unstable, you compartmentalize again, and then you got to pull it back together.
I love the analogy of kind of compartmentalizing all of these things and then starting to unify them. Can you give us an explanation of what a practical application of unifying two of those things might be and what that looks like?
Well, I think the practical application is one that we saw that was in all of the episodes, which was the return to their immigrant community. I mean, in all of the episodes, you saw them in some way, even in America, finding that connection between their ethnic community, their country of origin, and their LGBTQ identity, and wanting to be in that place. And which is so important, which is why it's so important for these immigrant communities to establish LGBTQ organizations and create that safety, because you can't leave one part of yourself behind or sacrifice it for another. You're not complete that way. You need those pieces to integrate, and so you need the Asian Pacific Rainbow Coalition, and you need the Iranian LGBTQ organizations, and you need the pageants that bring the Latino community together to have that safe place, to create that community so that you can continue to thrive, you can continue to grow.
I know you also think it's really important to talk about your experience, to discuss what you're feeling and the way that you compartmentalize these different things. Why do you think it's so important to discuss it and to be open about it?
Well, I think in a lot of the immigrant communities, just the whole notion of sexuality, period, let alone the notion of homosexuality, is so stigmatized, is so highly stigmatized. And so if there is no vocabulary, if there is no word, if there is no language that we can communicate to our families, to our friends, to our communities, then how will we ever find that unity, for ourselves? And how will we ever create that safety? And the only way to do it, even though the immigrant communities, and we heard this over and over again, will ask you to just shut it down and forget about it and live your life, but don't tell anyone. But in reality, the only way to do this, to reach any kind of like healthy conclusion, is to talk about it and to create forum and space for the conversations to open, because chances are an Iranian child will not walk up to their Iranian parent and have some kind of, positive communication around being LGBTQ, just as a Chinese child wouldn't. But if you create that conversation through the media, through the press, through conferences, through documentaries, then you're giving the voice. You're creating that voice and that chance for discussion.
Maybe as a filmmaker, there's always a goal with a piece that you're making or a conversation that you hope to spark or to encourage. What do you hope people walk away with from this series that you've been working on?
I think there are two things. The one is,
You can have more than one, that's okay.
well, the one is that I think it's to put a face and a story to things that are broader topics. In other words, I hope that when you open the paper and there are things that are written about immigration or about LGBT rights, I hope, and I guess this is what we talked about when we started working on the project, is that your story would be hopefully something that someone would remember and that they could use as a reference in a conversation, or something that, when they open the newspaper or push someone to go and take action and call their congressman, as you said, that they would remember Brandon, Elia, and Stacy. And that's something that we hoped for. And the second thing is, and it's kind of, incredible for me to be on the stage with all of you, because it's only at the end of what you saw that you see all of them cross-cut and woven together in the final 10 seconds with the question, what does home mean to you? And we were filming everyone simultaneously, but they were each edited into 3 separate stories. And we were hoping that by showing them together, that there would be a sense that while the stories and experiences are very diverse, that there's something universal about that journey, and that people would become aware of the diversity that is also in a place like Los Angeles, and take that with them within the LGBT community and beyond.
We have questions from the audience. The first one is more than one or two. What are the future plans for exhibition, and do you plan more episodes?
This is like a producer question.
Yeah.
But the answer is that we started working on what was episode 4, which is following Dennis, who is an HIV positive gay Russian refugee who was detained by ICE and later released. And that ended up being on Condé Nast's platform Them, and got, I think, 300,000 or 400,000 views. So that was an interesting experience to see how the stories can go on the internet. And we're still figuring out, in terms of further episodes, what they would look like, how we would weave them together. And I will say that in terms of these 3 episodes, which again were done fundamentally as students, we've been able to see them screened, as I said, to university students in Boston, and to kids in Arkansas, and in New York, and Santa Fe, and so many places, where each time we had reactions almost like your reaction right now, Mariana, where somebody said, we had a screening in Boston as an example, where somebody raised his hand and said, I'm a gay Saudi Arabian asylum seeker, and it's the first time I'm seeing my story on screen through these individuals here, which was kind of an incredible thing that I didn't expect. Or in New York, where Brandon flew with us to New York City, and a Mormon couple with a lesbian daughter came and approached Brandon and said, thank you for sharing your story. So from an interview that we did with the Chinese community in Los Angeles to a Mormon couple in New York, it's kind of one of those amazing things where you start a story and you don't know where it's going to finish. So we hope to continue with stuff like that.
There's so much intersectionality in everything you just said. An HIV positive gay Russian refugee story, you have Mormon gay, I think it's important for us to think about all of the intersectionalities and the ways that we find ourselves, and how I was saying to you all before this panel, I don't think we think about the intersectionalities that we see represented here. The immigrant story, but the story of what it's like to come to this country, to leave your country, to leave something behind, to have to hide something, but also want to be able to share it. I think it's really, really important. I'm going to go quickly because we only have a few more minutes. Brandon, were you able to, it says, the question was, have you been able to make a lot of personal relationships here in LA? Have you grown your community here?
Actually, I have a lot of personal relationship with some people, but mostly it's limited just on the Chinese American community.
Okay. I think this question is for Ella. How did you cope with your family hurting you in a way that made you believe they may never love you again? And if they've changed, how did you get through the bad times? Well, I think we kind of touched on this a little bit, but yeah.
I think, thank you, my son. My best friends are sitting there. So one thing I always tell them is compartmentalizing. So I think that's it. Every morning, my brain goes to different sections, and then I took the section that is most important thing. And to be honest with you, we're working with the Masona, and I would never, if somebody told me even 3 years ago that you would go and talk to Persian community, I would say never. It's never gonna happen. Not because I'm saying Persian, because my parents are part of that Persian community too, although they're not here. And I think they hurt me most, and then I was so hurt that I didn't want to deal with anything. But I think that the moment I start healing and I felt that I can move forward, that was the moment that I wanted to go and talk and share. And to be honest, I don't think about them. There are days that I wake up and there are moments that I feel hurt and sorry, but I take the box that is most important to me that day, and I always tell myself I have a lot of time to hate people or be hurt, so let's just do this.
Let's just choose to be happy today.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Amy, it says, the question was, where can this be seen? Where can it be shared? How can people have access to it or share it with other people?
Well, we actually got, this is also a producer question, but we actually got 4 distribution offers, and we are navigating that right now, and hopefully we will be able to say it very soon. Mark's giving me the thumbs up.
Translation,
But
follow me on Twitter. I will keep you abreast of what's happening. That's what it sounds like. All right, I'll take that.
But I will say that it will be online in different platforms,
Okay.
which is great, more than one.
Like we're done with that, man.
Secrets.
Okay, for Ella and Brandon, and Mariana, I'll open this up to everyone on the panel. How have all of you found the strength to share your own stories? Because each of you is able to speak personally from your own perspective. And the question says, how did you find the strength and voice to share your story? What advice do you have for those struggling to find their strength and voice?
I think there's a lot to learn about our lives. It's a lot of whatever you're going through, you can definitely keep fighting. After the elections, I remember everybody saying we're gonna fight, and someone looked at me and said we're gonna keep fighting, and I was like, what are you talking about? Coming from a country that persecuted me, and I've been fighting all my life. I'm gonna keep surviving. I'm gonna keep living and enjoying every moment of my life. I celebrate life.